Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on drought conditions and wildfire outlook for the Southwest and California. My name is Joel Lisenby. I'm the Regional Drought Information Coordinator for the Southern Plains and the Intermountain West regions at NIDIS. Those of you that are not familiar with NIDIS, it's one of those acronyms that we often use. It is the National Integrated Drought Information System. I also sit with the Cooperative Institute of Research in Environmental Sciences at the University of Colorado. And a huge thanks to all of you for joining us today. Before I get started, I want to go over a few quick webinar logistics. For this webinar, everybody is muted. The webinar is being recorded, and the webinar recording will be made available after the webinar finishes, possibly later today, but more likely later this week, on NIDIS's YouTube channel and also at drought.gov/webinars. There will also be a follow-up email later on with a link to this recording. The format of today's webinar will be a presentation by each of our invited experts, followed by a time for question and answers at the end. If you have any questions as we go along, go ahead and type them into the questions box within GoToWebinar, and I'll be collecting all of those and moderating questions when we get to that portion of the program. Just a quick overview for those of you who may be unfamiliar with NIDIS and who we are and what we do. I mentioned a minute ago that it's one of these big acronyms. It's for the National Integrated Drought Information System. We sit within NOAA, where we provide information that will allow the nation to move from a more reactive to a proactive approach to managing drought and drought risk. You can find more information about NIDIS at drought.gov. There's also a ton of other really useful tools and data there to help people know what's going on with drought in their community. And I encourage you to head over to drought.gov if you haven't been there yet. NIDIS is coordinated regionally. We have 8 regional drought early warning systems, or DEWs for short. I've shown them on the map here. Today's webinar is hosted in coordination with the California Nevada DEWs and also the Intermountain West DEWs. And I would also like to acknowledge the help that we've received from the USDA's Southwest Climate Hub, which their region overlaps both of these regions. I've shown them here in a little yellow. I hope I drew my line straight. As mentioned just a moment ago, the format of today's webinar will look a little bit like this. We'll have a few presentations first, followed by some time for questions. Before I introduce today's speakers, I'd like to turn a little bit of time over to Dr. Emily Elias. Dr. Elias is the director of the USDA Southwest Climate Hub, and I'm going to give her a little bit of time to do an acknowledgement of the traditional lands. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Emily.
Thanks, Joel. Yeah, we'd like to begin this webinar by respectfully acknowledging that the land each of us is joining from today is the ancestral lands of Indigenous cultures. As we are all in different parts of our country, this will be different for each of us. The land I'm speaking from is the ancestral land of the Nuchu, or Ute, and is connected to the communal and ceremonial spaces of the Apache, the Pueblos of New Mexico, Hopi, and the Dene Nation, or Navajo Nation. I believe it's important to provide this acknowledgement because the narratives of this land and this region have long been told from one dominant perspective without an acknowledgement of history. This acknowledgement is also important because many of us strive to manage the land and water well for our future generations. Thanks for your attention and respect in acknowledging this important legacy. Back to you, Joel.
Well, thank you so much for that, Emily. I think that was really important and very well said. Now I am quite honored to be able to welcome and introduce today's speakers. And our speakers, if you're on, you're welcome to turn your camera on while I introduce you so we can all get an idea of who you are and what you look like. First, I'm going to introduce Dan McAvoy. Dan is an assistant research professor at the Desert Research Institute and regional climatologist for the Western Regional Climate Center. Dan works on hydroclimatology research and data applications in the Western U.S. and has a focus on drought monitoring and climate wildfire interactions and subseasonal to seasonal prediction. So thank you very much, Dan, for being here. Following Dan's presentation, we'll hear from Jim Wallman. Jim is a meteorologist at the National Integrated Coordination Center, providing weather information and briefings to support incident resource mobilization across the country. And then following Jim, our final presenter will be Christina Rostano. Christina is an assistant professor with the University of Nevada Cooperative Extension and director of the Living with Fire program, which she's going to be talking to us about later on today. Christina specializes in fire ecology, wildfire preparedness, and stakeholder engagement. Thanks to all of you for being here, and I'm now going to pass it over to you, Dan, to get us started.
Great, thanks, Joel. I'm actually gonna turn off my webcam for the presentation. And get started here. So, okay, well, thank you so much, Joel, for those introductions, and I'm happy to be here today. And I'm going to be giving an overview of the current drought conditions and a very brief outlook of what's to come in the next few months going forward. And so we'll just jump right in here. This here is a snapshot of the current drought conditions over the Southwest from the U.S. Drought Monitor. And this was just released this morning. I took a look, it didn't really change much from the previous week. And so these drought conditions are widespread across the region. And so any of the shaded areas are either abnormally dry or in drought. And most of the areas are in those beige, orange, and red colors, which are drought categories. And so the areas that have the most extreme and exceptional drought right now, well, it's fairly widespread, but New Mexico stands out, southern Nevada, as well as parts of central and southern California stand out as areas that are in extreme and exceptional drought right now. And so we are heading into the monsoon season, which can bring some short-term temporary relief, particularly to Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and parts of Colorado. But we'll have to see how that pans out. And so I want to emphasize that this is a long-term drought, a multi-year drought that the Southwest is experiencing right now, and the drought monitor maps have been showing drought for a long time now, not just recently. And so this map is showing the statewide 2-year precipitation ranks, and so this is going back from May 2020 through April 2022. And we see that the entire West, with the exception of Washington, has been quite dry. But if we look at the southwestern states, all the states highlighted there, except for Colorado, have the second driest 2-year period going back to 1895, and Colorado comes in with the 5th driest. So again, this has been ongoing for several years, and for a lot of these states, it's been longer than 2 years, and it's been on the order of going on decades of dry conditions. And on top of that, it's been a hot drought. There's been a very pronounced warming trend, particularly in the Southwest, over the last 20 to 30 years or so. And this really shows up in the last couple of years. So again, this is the temperature rankings now from May 2020 through April 2022, the 2-year period. And we have a lot of 2nd, 3rd, and 4th warmest 2-year periods going back over 125 years. And so the heat on top of the dryness is going to exacerbate the drought conditions by drying out the land surface faster, increasing water uptake from the surface, evapotranspiration when there's water available, and lead to more severe drought conditions overall. So I want to focus a little bit more next on some of the finer scale patterns coming from the state level down to these gridded data products and some of the more recent time periods. So I want to start with temperature and precipitation anomalies from the start of our water year in the West, which was October 2021, going through March. So on the left, we have the percent of average precipitation, where the browns are drier than average and the greens are wetter than average. And so a few patterns stand out. The southern tier of the Southwest, again, stands out as very dry. A lot of areas less than 50% of average precipitation, and some areas well below that. We do see some areas in the northern Great Basin into northeast Utah that are showing some green, so above average precipitation for that 6-month period. However, as I'll show you later, the timing of this really matters, and a lot of this, especially in the Great Basin, is all from a very large atmospheric river event that occurred in October 2021, but then it got very dry after that. So in the large scale, it is above average, but we'll see that the timing really makes the difference. Now on the right, we have the same time period, but the temperature anomalies. And so generally, most of the region was above average temperatures. Those are the yellows and oranges and reds. There are a few splotches of blue suggesting slightly below average temperatures. But we see that the mountains actually stand out as hotspots with the highest temperature anomalies, with the Sierra Nevada standing out, as well as the Rocky Mountains standing out anywhere from 1 to 2 degrees Celsius above average, or warmer than that during the 6-month period. Now, if we shift to about the last 60 days or so, basically April and May, the pattern did shift a little bit. The weather patterns shifted, and there was some persistent storminess really centered in the Pacific Northwest, where it was much cooler and wetter than average, but some of that did drift into the northern tier of the Southwest region. So if we look at the percent of average precipitation for that time period, the southern tier again stands out as very dry. I will say that this is the climatologically dry period for some of these areas in Arizona and New Mexico, but still the average conditions are not zero precipitation, but a lot of these areas have seen just about no precipitation in the last 2 months or so. There was some storminess that did make it into Northwest California, the northern Sierra Nevada, and parts of the northern Great Basin. And so that was helpful, but still the general pattern for the Southwest was dryness over the last 60 days as well. The temperatures are a bit different story. Again, that storm track did allow cooler than average temperatures over the last 60 days in the northern tier, but much warmer than average in the southern tier. And so it's been pretty relentless in Arizona and New Mexico, Southern California, with warm and dry conditions this entire water year. So let's move on to the snowpack, which of course feeds the majority of the water supply and what happens with drought conditions as we go into the summer. So this is from the NRCS showing the mountain snow-tell locations. And this is showing the percent of median snow water equivalent, or amount of the water in the snowpack, for the peak of the snow water equivalent for this year. And what we see is that a lot of areas, most of California was below average peak snowpack. It was very low in the northwest mountains of California, less than 50% of average. And the Sierra Nevada was anywhere from 50 to 75% of average for their peak. But as we'll see, the peak actually occurred very early this year in the winter and not when it was supposed to occur this year. As you shift over into the Rocky Mountains and the other parts of the Southwest, it was a bit of a mixed bag. There were some areas that had below normal peak, but there are some greens and blue dots in there where that was near to above average peak snowpack. But as I said earlier, the timing of this accumulation and melt are very important. So I wanted to show a couple of different basins in the region and how the snowpack accumulated and melted this year. So this first one is the Truckee River Basin in the northern Sierra Nevada, which drains into the Great Basin and feeds the Reno and Tahoe area with water supply. And this is showing the snow water equivalent accumulations from the start of the water year through the end. The black line is this year. The green line is the long-term median, and then the colors show the maximum, minimums, and other percentile values. So as I mentioned, early in the year, there was a very cold and stormy period in December, and this was over much of the entire western region. Really big snowpack accumulations in December, record setting for some places in the northern Sierra Nevada. But then it just shut off, and we see this really, really long dry spell with no accumulation. And then it started to melt, right around on time for when it was melting, but well below the median peak values. So we never got anywhere close to this average value for the early April period. But there were some beneficial storms. These were the April and early May storms that I was talking about on the previous slides. So these did bring some water to the snowpack, which was great. It slowed down the melt and actually accumulated the snowpack. But again, we never got anywhere near this average peak. And surprisingly, this basin is melting out almost on time. We thought in early April that we might have one of the earliest meltouts on record, but those storms were beneficial, but in the long term, not drought busting. Now, if we move over to the San Juan, upper San Juan Basin near the Four Corners area, we actually saw a very similar pattern in December. Again, this was a big west-wide, spatially cohesive weather pattern with big snows in this region too in December. Everything was looking good to the start of the season. And then again, we had that long dry spell in the region, but it was a bit different here where storms actually returned in early spring, and this particular basin got above average near the peak of the season, but never reached that median peak. And then things began to melt out early and melt out very rapidly. And this was a combination of, well, lack of storms, warm temperature, and also a lot of dust that had settled into the region over the winter really accelerated the melt. And this basin melted out just about a month early. So that is not good for water supply and drought conditions. So speaking of water supply, let's just talk about some of the reservoir conditions. On the left, we have the California large reservoirs, and most of the larger ones are well below normal. The bigger ones like Shasta and Oroville are much below normal, and this is again due to persistent drought over several years with little flow coming down the mountains in the spring and summer. And on the upper Colorado and lower Colorado, again, the runoff and the water supply for the year is not looking good at all. Lake Powell and Lake Mead are at their lowest levels since they were filled, 25 to 30% of capacity for those reservoirs. And if we look at the flows for Lake Powell, so the May inflow, or I'm sorry, the observed April inflow was 66% of average. The April through July forecast is 55% of average flows into Lake Powell. And this has been happening now over and over again, where if we look at the water year precipitation for the upper Colorado, it was actually 93% of normal, which doesn't look that bad. But again, it's the combination of the dry soils, the warm temperatures, the thirsty atmosphere that is not allowing this runoff to make it into the precipitation to make it into the reservoirs as runoff. And so as we move into the discussion about fire, I did want to mention the situation in the south, in New Mexico and parts of Colorado and Arizona, where there are a number of active fires burning. And so I mentioned the thirsty atmosphere, and so this has been increasing fire danger in the region for a couple of months now. This is the 1-month evaporative demand drought index that was ending on May 29th. Of this year, and the reds are well above normal evaporative demand. And so this indicates persistent hot, dry, windy, and sunny conditions, which act to dry out the land surface and the fuels very quickly. And on the right, this is showing the time series for the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, where some of the largest fires are burning. And this 1-month evaporative demand has been above normal for several months now, and record setting for a while there, and similar to conditions that we would see in mid to late June and early July. And so I just wanted to very quickly show the outlooks. This one is for the June outlook that was issued just on May 31st. And so for the Southwest, we see mostly higher than average probabilities of above average, higher probabilities of above average temperatures, with higher probabilities in Arizona and southeast New Mexico. Not much of a signal for precipitation. There is a slightly a weak signal for below average precipitation probabilities in parts of New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, and the northern Great Basin. And this is now the June through August, so the summer outlook. Not what you want to see for temperatures, but not unexpected, as we have seen this summer warming trend for a long time now. Very high probabilities of above normal temperatures for the entire region, centered on the Four Corners area. The precipitation outlook does have a hint higher odds for above normal precipitation in parts of the monsoon area in southern Arizona, but those probabilities are quite low. And then the northern tier of the Southwest has slight odds for below normal precipitation for the summer. And I will leave it at that. And if you all have questions, I will take them later. And so thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan. That was great. And now I'm going to pass over to Jim. As soon as you have the permission to share, you can just take it away, Jim.
All right. Hope everyone can see the presentation now. And is that true, Joel? We're good?
Yes, it looks
okay,
great.
Good. All right, great. So I'm just going to go ahead, and I'd like to thank Dan for that really good summary of the current conditions and the outlook and all of it, because it really feeds well into the fire outlook that I'm going to be showing you for the rest of the summer and into the early fall. So just give a brief overview of our fire situation as of right now. We are currently at a preparedness level 2 nationally on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the highest. 1 is very active. Currently the Southwest area, which includes Arizona and New Mexico, is at preparedness level 5 for their area, with most of the activity really occurring in New Mexico at this time. There are 5 type 1 and type 2 incident management teams deployed. These are all located in New Mexico, primarily on the Hermit's Peak and Black Fires. But one thing that's not shown here in Alaska, there is a lot of fires beginning to occur in Alaska. So we're seeing activity really start to increase there as well. So what we do with this National Significant Fire Potential Outlook is these are outlooks that are issued monthly, and we look ahead for the next 4 months. We'll combine the current situation with forecast weather and climate. And so Dan has already done a great job of going that overall. And then we'll go into a detailed discussion of the total fire environment, talking about current fuels conditions, what's going on, how dry they are, any new grass growth, and kind of put that into the outlook. So, and these are really good tools for planning, like severity requests, resource allocation, any extensions that may be needed. And the link there at the bottom is where you can find these outlooks on our webpage. So getting into the outlook, at least for June, as Dan describes, been very dry over the Southwest, expecting above normal potential for most of Arizona into Mexico through June, also into portions of the Southern Great Basin and most of Colorado as well, due to the very dry conditions there. Moving up into Northwest California, so far, skipped ahead by accident there. We are seeing above normal potential already in the lower elevations of Northern California, where there's a good grass crop, generally below about 2,000 to 2,500 feet at this time. As we go through the month, we're expecting drying to continue to occur, and the green up and greener fuels in the higher elevations will start to cure out, and that'll carry over into most of Northern California as well. And then going into July, Dan mentioned, like the monsoon coming on, we're expecting a return to near normal significant fire potential in the Southwest and greater Four Corners region. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're not going to have any fires there, but when we do get fires during the monsoon, they tend to be fairly small and easily caught and don't burn nearly as actively due to the increased moisture and precipitation. But as we move north, we still expect some portions of Colorado, mainly east of the divide toward the plains, to have above normal potential, but west of the divide there could be a few areas up there in northwest Colorado, where potential will remain above normal. And then moving into Northern California, expecting that above normal potential to continue throughout the summer, and also creep into portions of the Sierra front of Western Nevada, more in the timber fields there. One thing we are, we do know that, much of Nevada remains in drought as well, but one of the things that the drought does, unless precipitation is well timed during the spring, if it tends to be a drier winter overall, we don't get the grass growth and fine field growth that will be necessary to really carry fires on a large scale there. However, as Dan mentioned, just to the north of there, when you get into Oregon, Washington, southern Idaho, where a lot of precipitation was in spring, even though it was a little bit drier over the winter, that precipitation was well timed, and there is extensive grass growth just to the north. Although we are hearing that in portions of Northeast California where there was above normal, there is extensive grass growth there as well. Into August, above normal significant fire potential will really continue the Sierra front of Western Nevada across much of Northern California. And one thing we start to do is we see the monsoon perhaps start to weaken, especially toward the latter half of August, starting to see the central and southern Sierra also increase in potential there, as well as the coast range mountains of central California. But with the monsoon continuing, we're expecting the near normal potential for much of the greater Four Corners area as well into southwestern Wyoming. And then finally into September, really much of the Southwest in the Four Corners region, near normal potential. One thing we will be watching as we get into, depending on how quickly the monsoon subsides, if there is enough period of time for any grass that grows during the monsoon, like occurred last summer, if there's enough time for that grass to cure and dry, we could have a bit of a peak, a bit of a second peak in fire activity in the Southwest. So that's something we will be watching closely over the coming months. However, in California, really, it's going to be, the potential is really going to be focused there for September, continuing across all of Northern California into the Coast Range, into the transverse and peninsular ranges of Southern California and the Central and Southern Sierra as well. Also, as we get into September, we'll start to see potentially more north or northeast offshore wind events. They tend not to be extremely strong this time during September, but it's something that will be monitored. And, we have had occasionally exceptionally strong ones, like we had 2 years ago on Labor Day. So just to kind of summarize what we're looking at here, high fire activity continues in New Mexico and likely will continue to the Southwest in June, and the onset of the monsoon will return the Four Corners to near normal due to the increasing moisture and thunderstorms. Drier than normal that we're seeing in the plains will have above normal potential over there. That's normally a dipole that occurs. If the Southwest is above normal, the plains tend to be below normal during the summer season. And then fire activity will continue to progress north and west through July and August into September, especially over California. One thing we always like to mention is that this is a forecast of potential and what we think the fuels are going to be like. It doesn't necessarily say that the fire activity is going to be above normal. What we really need are these critical fire weather events necessary to realize that potential. For example, last year there was a big event in the Northern Rockies in early July, and the strong high pressure record heat that preceded it over the Northwest, and that was a big trigger to realize that potential that we were forecasting. So that's just something that we're keeping an eye on right now. Everything is lining up for another above normal fire season, and we're preparing as such. So thank you, and Joel, turn it back to you.
Thanks heaps, Jim. That was really interesting, and I have a few questions that I'm going to save until the end. Sure. I thought that was a fascinating talk. Thank you. We're going to now pass over to Christina. Christina, as soon as you get that permission to share your screen, you can take it away.
All right, am I all good here?
We can hear you. I don't. Okay. Yes, we see your presentation and we can hear you. You're good to go.
Okay, perfect. So this is a great segue because now I will share some resources to get prepared for the fire season that we're expecting is going to be another large one in the West. So as Joel mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, I work for University of Nevada, Reno Cooperative Extension, and I'm the director of an outreach program called Living with Fire, as you can see here on the screen. I'm having a hard time advancing my slides here. Give me a sec. Things are kind of frozen on my end. Okay, so what we do in this program, the Living with Fire program, is we focus a lot on public outreach and education. We put on webinars and events to teach people how to be prepared for wildfire, but also to understand wildfire in the regions in which they live. We create a variety of peer-reviewed publications that I'll share with you in a minute. And we just newly, as of last year, we produce an original podcast. We are creating a fire science curriculum for high schools throughout Nevada and expanding that into middle schools and elementary schools. So we're really trying to kind of increase that education outreach to all different types of people and demographics and age groups throughout the region. And then we also helped partner with different agencies to put on conferences throughout the region to support fire adapted communities and other kind of community preparedness events. So just to kind of go over some of the resources that we have, we put on a very extensive wildfire awareness campaign every year. That generally includes some sort of marketing and messaging that folks can use in different agencies to promote wildfire preparedness. We do not work on wildfire prevention. We leave that to agencies like the Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management, and we focus more on preparing communities for the eventuality of having wildfire where they live. You can learn more about our campaign and our website. You can see here on the bottom, which is livingwithfire.com. On there, you can see a list of all of our events that we have each year. We generally have a variety of in-person events in actual communities, but we are live streaming those as well. So you're able to go online and see what those are, so you can sign up if you'd like. And we also have archived all of our presentations we've done in the past few years, because obviously everybody did a lot online. So we have a variety of great resources, like presentations on how to prepare for wildfire smoke and how to evacuate livestock and animals, and how to do defensible space and home hardening, and all of the different tools and resources that you need to be prepared. So some examples of some of the publications that we have. We just published in 2020 a wildfire home guide to learn how to retrofit your home. So there's key information within here about all of the different components of your home that you can remodel or retrofit. For example, your roofs, your rain gutters, your eaves, your vents, your siding, your skylights, your windows, your decks, your garages, your chimneys, and your fences. The information in here is relevant for if you want to change things on your existing home, or if you want to build a new construction home. And so in some areas, there are codes in place now that you have to have a hardened home construction for wildfire. And this helps you learn some tips and tools to build that hardened infrastructure into your home. When you look at the data from communities that have lost homes in a wildfire, largely what are the largest reasons for that is not having safe construction of your home and having your firewood stacked up near your home, dry decks, etc. So this guide really helps go through a list of every component and what you can really do to increase your overall home construction for fire. Sorry, I'm having a freezing situation here again. Okay, then we also have a new publication that just came out called the Nevada Flood After Fire Guide. Even though this is specific to Nevada, because we worked on it with stakeholders in Nevada, it's very relevant to places all over the West, and really provides information of how to be prepared for flood after fire, and what you can do to respond if a flood has occurred. And so there's specific information about how the ecosystems respond, how to determine if your house is in an area that could be susceptible to flood after fire. So really provide some great information rooted in applied science to help folks understand how to be prepared for flood after fire. We also have a variety of other great resources available on the website, like a wildfire evacuation checklist that you can use. This is available in English and in Spanish. There's also information about how to live with smoke. So what are the things that you can do to prepare yourself and your family for smoke inhalation, which all of us in the West now are dealing with this extensively. And then also just how to make sure you're signed up for community emergency alerts. And so if you live in Nevada, on our website, we have links to all of the different programs and platforms that folks use to sign up for those. It varies by place, so that's a little bit unfortunate that it's not just the same everywhere, but every sheriff's office and office of emergency management has their own approach to that. But again, if you live in Nevada, we have all of that available online on our website, livingwithfire.com. If you don't live in Nevada, you can generally contact the sheriff's office in your county to determine how to sign up for emergency alerts. We can't emphasize this enough because people don't find out the information quick enough that they need to evacuate sometimes, and that can be incredibly dangerous and difficult for people that are actually doing the firefighting work to do their job if folks are still in their homes. So just a little plug for our new amazing podcast. So we have 9 episodes now, and you can find that on Spotify, iTunes, all of the spots that you normally find a podcast. We have a lot of great information about how people experience wildfire. And so there's stories about the history of fire in Nevada, how lay managers prepare for fire, stories about community members who've experienced fire themselves and had to evacuate, tribal history of fire use in Nevada. So there's a lot of really great stories, and we're really just trying to increase our educational resources available so that we just continue to teach people about the ways to live with fire in your communities. And then just last, we're really excited about this. This is our new fire science curriculum that we're launching throughout Nevada. And this will be relevant to most states in the West, or can be tailored to states in the West. We've specifically made it pretty focused on Great Basin ecosystems. So that includes sagebrush, cheatgrass, woodlands, and then some mixed. And so we, it is integrated into the biology, earth science, AP, environmental science, agriculture science classes. It's been developed with stakeholders and fire professionals, high school science teachers and educators in extension. And we're really, really excited about it. If you want more information about that, you can contact us. So anyways, here is my email and information and livingwithfire.com website. And I hope you guys were able to hear me. It seemed like the internet was kind of going in and out. So if you have any questions, let me know, or you can email me. All right, thanks.
Excellent, Christina. That was great. Thank you for that. Hold on, I'm going to share my screen now too. So we have some time now for questions. We plan to end this webinar at the top of the hour, so we have just a bit under 20 minutes. If any of you would like to ask questions, please type it into the question box and I will relate that to our presenters. I think while Christina her talk is freshest in our mind, my first question is for you, Christina. If for people who live in or near a wildland urban interface, what is the number one most important thing that you would hope people would know about their fire risk?
So I would say what they know about their fire risk or what they can do for their fire preparedness.
Yes, what's the number one thing people can do for their fire preparedness? That's what I meant to ask.
Yep, okay. I think the number one thing that people can do is to create a 5-foot ember resistant zone around their house. So you don't want to have anything combustible within 5 feet around your house. I think that's the easiest thing that you can do quickly. And then the second easiest thing I would say is to screen all of your vents. So supposed to put a 1/8 inch non-combustible screen around all of your vents in your house. And then I'm going to add another thing here because I mean, it's hard to say the number one thing, but also be prepared to evacuate. I mean, I think that has to be almost the number one, is you have to have an evacuation plan ready. If you have medications that you take or kind of important things that you cannot leave home without, make sure you have backups of all of those in an evacuation go bag ready to go, because it's not when, it's if, as we all know, right? I mean, I had to evacuate twice last year and I was 8 months pregnant for both of the wildfires happened like really back to back where I live, and it was just a disaster for our family. But we were ready to go. So just being prepared to leave, and but then, you know, hoping that if you do have to leave, you've done some protective things around your home so that hopefully it won't burn. And then I'll add one more and I'll stop. Always check your fire insurance and see how well you're covered, because most people in the Western United States are very underinsured because they base the amount of insurance coverage on average cost to rebuild. But I'm up in the Lake Tahoe region, and it's significantly more expensive here than everywhere else. So most people here are underinsured. So that's an important thing to look at.
Great, that is great advice. Thank you very much, Christina. My next question is going to be for Dan. And I also, before I ask this question, I've had a lot of questions come in, and just to set expectations, we probably won't have time to get to all of them, but I'll do my best as we go. Dan, do you have any ideas about why the mountain area anomalies are warmer than the lower areas? And any thoughts about the implications for that, for higher elevation warming?
Yeah, that's a good question. There have been some studies noting more warming in mountain areas, not just in the Western U.S., but around the globe. And one thing that stands out to me in the West is that, especially in the winter and spring, when we have these high pressure areas that often, generally lead to daytime high temperatures being warmer, we have temperature inversions where the valley bottoms This is very obvious in places like the Great Basin, Central Valley of California, and other valleys throughout the Intermountain West. The valleys will have below normal temperatures because the cold air settles due to the high pressure pattern, and the mountains tend to stay very warm even in the nighttime hours. And so that could have a lot to do with seeing these warmer temperatures in the mountains, over several week or several month periods. So that could be one reason for that. And I'm sorry, did you have a follow-up to that? I forget what the second part was.
The follow-up was thoughts about the implications for higher elevation warming.
Right, yeah, so that is going to be very critical during the snow season when there's snowpack in the mountains. And so again, this gets back to those temperature inversions. And if the temperatures aren't able to get cold enough at night in the mountains, then the snowpack won't refreeze, and there could be more melt happening, especially in the spring. During these overnight hours when we normally have the top parts of the snowpack refreezing, and then also, during the daytime when you have these higher maximum temperatures, that also more snow melt. So in the end, it means more snow is likely to come off of the mountains during those periods.
Great, thanks, Dan. My next question, I'm going to go to Jim next. Jim, can you talk about the difference among terms like fire potential, fire danger, and fire risk? Are there some words that we should or should not be using when we're talking about the coming fire season?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So they're all related, but like fire risk itself is kind of just something that we look at, and I'm gonna pull up the NWCG, the National Wildfire Coordinating Group glossary, just to make sure I'm not stepping anything. But in general, they all are related. So the fire risk generally just talks about like your risk in an area overall to fire itself. And what it is. And then fire potential and fire danger are much more closely related. Fire danger is just referring to the what the past weather conditions and current and forecast weather is relating to like fire. So what you see on your Smokey Bear ratings from low, moderate, high, very high to extreme fire danger. Those kind of give you more of a current conditions. And then we refer to potential, and we're generally when we're referring to significant fire potential is those are fires that when they reach essentially a certain size, depending on area, when they would require outside resources to help contain and control those fires.
Thanks for explaining that, Jim. That's really useful. We've had one question come in from Rachel Ramirez with CNN, and Rachel requested if she could be unmuted to ask the question, and we're going to try that. Rachel, if you can unmute, you can go ahead and ask. If not, she did write her question down, and I can read it.
Can folks hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, hi everyone. Thanks so much for doing this. And I guess my question was basically, what are the plans in place to deal with the fires in concert, with unprecedented water cuts and restrictions currently in place across the West? We just put out a story this past weekend on how wildfires are also destabilizing the soil. So when it rains, charged sediments would flow into rivers and reservoirs that are used for drinking water. So in that context of, the Western water crisis, how are officials planning to deal with another active wildfire season, as Jim said, while also, thinking about water supply for people? Thank you.
Thanks for that question, Rachel. Who would like to take that? Dan or Jim, would you like to try to tackle that one first?
Jim might have more to say than I
Yeah,
will.
I probably would. Could you just repeat the question? Because I just want to make sure I'm hearing it right.
Sure, I can try to. Well, sorry, Rachel, are you still there? Could you repeat the question for Jim?
Yes, sorry, I was having mute button problems.
Fine.
Just like in short, I guess, in the context of, the water cuts and the unprecedented water cuts and restrictions in place across the West, what are the plans in place to deal with another active wildfire season while also thinking about water supply for people?
I can only speak to that as far as relates to fire. With the water surges and things like that we look at for, reservoir storage and things like that, we look at what is the potential to hamper a potential, fire suppression operations, where, are these reservoirs and sources of water that we have traditionally used in the past, are they going to be available, and what are the alternatives? That's kind of where, we look at it. As far as the rest of it, that's not something that we kind of look at very in depth at all.
So I would like to add something here. I would just like to say that this underscores the need to prepare communities for wildfire, because when these large emergency incidents occur, what we end up having to do is use a ton of water in an already water scarce environment to suppress wildfires. But and that's not a sustainable long-term solution to this problem. But we have a lot of tools in our toolkit that we can use, like prescribed fire, ecosystem work and management, creating defensible space around communities, hardening homes for wildfire, all of these tools in the toolkit that we can use so that we don't always push up against an emergency situation that further exacerbates the water crisis that we have in the West.
Great point. Thanks for adding that, Christina. My next question is going to be, I'm going to bring this back to Jim. Now, in Dan's talk, he showed the seasonal outlook, and it showed a very slight chance for improved an active monsoon system in the Southwest. And you showed in your wildfire outlooks about how the risk of above average wildfire, or sorry, above normal fire risk decreases once the monsoon starts. We've had the last two monsoon seasons have looked very different one from another. The last year was very active. The year before that, the media called it a non-soon. There was not much. What are you seeing this year that makes you think that the monsoon will be enough to suppress the fire risk?
What we're seeing is a lot of the research, and kind of goes into looking at past analogs too, and part of it dealing with the La Nina, is it tends to be fairly active overall during a La Nina, not always, but most often. And so that's where the forecast is based on, that kind of like being a little bit more active. And this is something that one of our meteorologists in Albuquerque who forecasts for the Southwest is seeing, and also with his collaboration with the Climate Prediction Center, they are also seeing that, are looking at not just those analogs, but then a lot of the modeling tools that are also used are showing at least a near normal, if not above normal monsoons. That's why we have a little bit higher confidence that this monsoon season will at least be near normal, if not above normal.
Okay, thanks for explaining that. I think that somewhat answers one of the other questions that we received about how La Nina and El Nino influence the fire risk. A follow-up question to that is, what do we know about monsoon season for and how it may or may not impact Southern California. Why do areas of the east of the continental divide only experience monsoon during the summer? And sort of, I guess, any other monsoon dynamic questions that help us understand what to expect this summer.
Yeah, I'll start with this, and Dan, if you have any insight too, I'd be welcome to have you add on. Is generally the monsoon is strongest like near the divide areas into Arizona, New Mexico, the Four Corners, because of where the moisture source tends to come from. The moisture source for most of the monsoon itself is from the Gulf of Mexico, and as that gets pulled westward, as generally there's high pressure aloft, and easterly winds push that moisture into Mexico itself, and then up slowly to the north and west into the southwestern United States. Now, as we get into California, that signal of like an easterly flow weakens considerably on average over the summer, and so the monsoon is not consistent over the Southern California deserts and the Southern Sierra. So it's not, that's why we don't necessarily see a decrease. Now, where the monsoon itself, the Southwest would generally see the more consistent, higher relative humidity and greater chance of thunderstorms daily. In Southern California, in the Southern Sierra, it comes in episodes where you can have periods, maybe a few days of chances of thunderstorms and higher relative humidity each day, and then it could be followed by 1 to 2 weeks of a drier period before you have another episode. So that's kind of how it occurs. So it's not as consistent in Northern California. You don't get the consistent easterly or southeasterly flow that you do in the east.
That's interesting, and that I think it highlights how complicated the weather patterns across the complex topography and the different latitudes and different climates we have in the West are, and how hard it is to forecast where the fire risk is going to change. We have time for just one more question. I hope it's a quick one, and it's for you, Christina. The question is your high school curriculum portable to other states, or is it tailored only for Nevada? I think that I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, so we did specifically make it for Nevada because we've been working with school teachers throughout Nevada to make sure it's really relevant to what they need. And then we also have it lined up with state standards in Nevada, but it will be very applicable and useful in other states, especially in the Great Basin region that have seagrass issues, because we talk a lot about that invasive grass cycle with wildland fire. So while it's made for Nevada, I do believe that it can be really applicable for other places in the West. Now, there is a curriculum that was developed out of the Rocky Mountain Research Station in Montana called the Fireworks curriculum, and that is a really good starting point if anybody wants to kind of use that or build their own. And so that's available online. We just wanted to tailor something specifically to our teachers and our state standards. And I'd be happy to speak with anybody more about how to do a process like that.
Okay, great. And the person who asked the question said thank you in the question box. So thanks for explaining all of that. That fills up all of our time, and I'm so sorry that we didn't get time to get to all of the questions. If you asked a question that is really important to get an answer to, reach out to us by email and we will respond to you. You'll be receiving a follow-up email with the recording of this presentation and also a summary of the presentations here in the next few days. And if you didn't get your question answered, but it's really important to you, respond to that email and we'll get back to you. So thanks to all of you who participated. Thanks to all of you who asked a question. And a very big thanks to our 3 presenters today. Also those who've helped behind the scenes, Amanda Sheffield and Adam Lang here at NIDIS. We couldn't have done it without all of your work. And that wraps up today's webinar. Thank you all for joining us.